Today we're going to do more texture mapping. So we're going to take our art prints and we're going to review how to put them onto a photograph / an illustration. It's kind of the same process. And then we are going to learn how to make a fashion flat in Illustrator. And then after our little mini crits, we will be doing that in class as our in-class activity, making a flat. So for starters, this is my Polaroid print that I made a couple weeks ago. It's a brick. I want to make note of that because bringing it into Photoshop, I'm going to have to double the height. But I do have this little guy. This is my single tile, right? It makes things repeat properly. I have this exported already, right? So it looks like this. Just one tile. And then back here, we can open that tile. Now, if we just went to edit to find pattern right now, it wouldn't work because it's not properly tiled. This is supposed to be a straight or a half drop, right? And it can only tile as a straight repeat. So to make this, it's a brick. To make this brick into a straight repeat, we have to double the height and offset this image by half on the top. So we're going to go to Image, Canvas Size, and check out, so 1802 is double the heights. And then we can duplicate our original layer and arrange these the proper way. So one gets half set off like that and the other one gets half set off like this. And now where things come off on the edge, they are coming on the other edge. It seems like we actually do have some pixels in here. Sorry, where's crop? There it is. There we go. So I miscalculated something there. Oh, we've got lines showing up. Oh, they're not real? Wow, I've never seen Photoshop do that before. But now we can go to Edits to find pattern. And back here we can switch to that pattern. So I just double clicked on my little pattern fill swatch and I can switch to my actually working pattern. Pattern fill really likes to be at like 25 or 50%, right? Because if you scale it up to like 26, it gets blurry. So this is at 27, but it's still kind of blurry at 25% today. But it's more blurry at 23. So there we have it. We have our pattern fill. So I have already color blocked my dress, but I have left a little of it open just to review how we're color blocking. So I'm using these color blocks in order to be able to select things really quickly again, right? So I can instantaneously select this section or this section, whichever, as it were. So I use my Polygonal Lasso tool, which is different than the regular Lasso tool. The Polygonal Lasso tool, you don't have to click and hold the whole time. I could just click and place the shape around it. It doesn't matter that I've started in the middle of the blue, because when I fill with my paint bucket tool, it will fill just right up to the edge of the blue. As long as we're filling on the same layer as the blue. It only matters what edges haven't been addressed before, like these edges that are touching her skin. So after you select all the way around, go around this guy. On these three sides, I don't have to click along the edge because when I grab my paint bucket tool, and the whole time for the Polygonal Lasso tool and for the paint bucket tool, I'm making sure anti-aliasing is off. And I want to fill it using the same color as this section so that when I grab it with the magic wand tool, it'll pick up both. So there we are. We just had to make sure we were on the color blocking layer while we were doing that. Now I can start picking out chunks of this to fill with patterns. So previously we've done this a number of ways, but today I'm going to leave my pattern fill just like this, and I'm going to copy and paste from this layer in order to get my patterns for all of these different pieces. So on this layer, I can't copy and paste it. It lets me draw the box, but if I choose copy and then I try to paste it somewhere, it's like, I don't understand what you want from me, and it just pastes one of the little tiles. So we have to rasterize that layer. Right-click rasterize layer, and then it'll just be normal pixels. And now when we go to copy and we paste it down here, it pastes it like normal. So here we're gonna warp this just a little bit. I'm gonna do the front of her, like this purple part. So to warp it, I can go to Edit, Transform, Warp. We're going to talk about puppet warp in a minute, but we're just doing normal warp right now. And with this, we can adjust it so that maybe it looks like it's coming a little bit forward in the front. It's going to be less important on this particular section of the garments because so I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it again. Right now with this guy, we're at the step where we would just go on our color block layer and select it, and then Command Shift Inverse back on this layer. We can delete the rest of it. Okay, so in this case, I've done this in a couple different ways, but I filled this with pattern, this one layer, and I rasterized it, right? We couldn't copy it before because it was rasterized. But now I right-click and I chose rasterized layer, and I'm good. So now if I draw a square on it, I can copy this section and then paste it, and it'll be pasted on its own layer automatically because that's how Photoshop works. And then I can go to Edit, Transform, Warp. That's where it lives. Edit, Transform, Warp. And then you can warp these guys. So it's just a matter of getting editable pixels on the garment. I'm going to try to like crunch this so that it'll look like it's moving further away from me on that little section, because I used kind of a big block for a little section right here. Oops. Command Shift Inverse or select Inverse, and you can hit delete. So that's warp. I'll do it one more time for this green section. I'm even gonna draw a box that fits around the green section so they don't have a ton of extra stuff. And then back on the pattern fill layer, copy it and paste it back here. And then we could always go to Edit, Transform, Warp. And kind of try to crunch it there, I guess. color blocking, even though the color blocking is not visible, as long as I click in the right area, it will select with the magic wand tool, even though it's not visible. And then we can switch back to this guy and do Command Shift Inverse and delete. Okay, this section. We're gonna try to use Puppet Warp for this section. I have color blocked these out, these little, let me show you what this looks like without the color blocking on it, right? These folds in the fabric, I did color block them out, but we're gonna try to do it with just Puppet Warp, and we're gonna do this whole section at once. So back here, I want a rectangle that covers up this whole section. Copy it and paste it. For this particular project, because I'm going to be using Puppet Warp, I really want to be able to see my color block layers through it, so I'm actually going to lower the opacity significantly. Like, I can still see the pattern on it, but I can adjust. I could adjust it and see what's going on. Really briefly, I want to address how Puppet Warp is used most often, or at least when I see like instructional videos about Puppet Warp, they're about how to do this. So edit, I'm sorry, we have to rasterize this layer or unlock it from the background, make it a regular layer. Edit Puppet Warp, and you get this grid across it, and you get this little pin guy, and the first thing I want to do is add anchors or pins all the way around the outside of the image, and that'll become clear why we do this in a second. Now, I'm going to actually shut off the mesh for a second, and you guys can see this more cleanly without the mesh. We can use this to really drastically morph her body. I can make her outrageously skinny, and I can thin up her arms, although that doesn't work. That's not working great. You can make her wrists really slim and her shoulders more in. You could raise her bust. We could we could edit things. There are a couple different ways to edit things like this, but we can hit enter to apply all of that transformation. If we went to edit Puppet Warp and we didn't put the pins around the outside, this is what would happen. So let's say I want to make her head smaller or larger or whatever. It adjusts the whole picture, right? So it kind of warps the picture around that one point. So that's why you have to add all the different pins, right? Or else it does this. But if I add, just that one more pin, so that's not what, we don't use it for craziness like that, but that is what it's normally used to make women look kind of sick. Back here though, we can use it to manipulate our pattern. So at the very least, Puppet Warp lives in Edit Puppet Warp. And we can, we don't have to go all the way around on the outside for this one. Like, I know that I want to kind of raise my edges up. So I'm gonna probably get rid of this one. If you ever want to delete a anchor point, it's Alt and then you click, and I can raise this guy up. Same thing on this side. I want to raise it up to over there. We can also rotate, so let me turn off the mesh for this guy. For this one, I did raise it and it's kind of working, but the angle still isn't quite right. So if I hold Alt Alt hovering over the pin will delete the pin. Alt on the outside of the pin, holding Alt and hovering around the pin is for rotating. So we can rotate the shape. All right. I wanted to try kind of imitating this droop around these shapes with the mesh tool. I don't know if it's really going to work out perfectly. It might be, so it says I cannot add a new pin where I want to, which is right about here, because it's too close to an existing pin, probably this one. To increase the number of available points, choose density more points. So up here at the top, I'm going to show you the mesh. This is what the mesh looks like right now. If we choose more points, it about doubles the amount of mesh points on it. So I can add this pin here, no problem. So I'm trying to kind of squish this, make it look like it's wrapping around this moment. I don't know how successful this is going to be, but I just wanted to show you this as another option for how we warp these guys. So this is a more advanced option. I don't know. Sure, something. It looks great. So whenever we feel like it looks good, we can hit enter to apply those transformations or that warping. And then even though it's not on top, I can switch to my color block layer and select. I'm holding shift to select more than one color blocked area. And then command shift inverse, and I can delete the rest of this guy. So let's take a look now. If I bump this up to 100% opacity, I'm going to change all these to multiply. So even though there is shadow on this dress, the shadow isn't showing up that great. You can use like tiny pieces of it, but I just wanted to address also how we might kind of bump up the contrast in the dress itself. If I bumped up the contrast on the whole background, right, if I went to edit, adjustments, brightness / contrast, and like lowered the brightness, which is putting more shadow into the dress, it's just also making the picture look bad. So instead I'm going to isolate the dress. Let me shut off the rest of these for a second. I've already chosen, I already have the dress, so I can really easily pick out just the dress right now by selecting, I'm on the color block layer and I'm selecting the background of the color block layer, which means just this color filled section is left behind. So I can do command shift inverse, and now I'm just selecting the interior. And on the background, I can do command C and then edit, paste special, and from there I can paste in place. So now I have a layer, and I can shut off my background layer to demonstrate this. I have a layer that's just my dress, right? We're gonna make this darker so that more of the shadows on it show through to my texture mapped dress. Because right now it barely shows any shadows, even though this is on multiply. And I could lower my opacity and get more shadows showing through, but this is another option. So with my dress selected, and maybe with your texture mapped patterns on it, so that we can see how it looks. Let me turn them on. We are going to select that just dress layer and go to image, adjustments, brightness / contrast. And we can kind of lower the brightness and up the contrast until we get more of these shadows in there, which that looks better. And we can hit OK. And she still looks fine and normal, so it didn't adjust her at all. It just adjusted that dress layer. Even though the dress probably doesn't look that great under here, it looks kind of darkened and weird, it's okay because we're covering it with our texture. Okay. So I can do the same thing for this fashion illustration. I've already color blocked out this jacket, and I apparently left a layer from last class on there. So again, I just filled this guy with colors on her own layer, and I can start filling them. So I can go to Layer, New Fill Layer Pattern, and rasterize this pattern layer I just made so that it's just made of pixels, and then I can copy and paste from that layer and warp them. So that's about the right size. Back to my pattern layer, copy, and paste. And then I can go to Edit, Transform, Warp, right? So I'm just copy and pasting a square onto here of my pattern, and now I'm warping it so that it kind of looks like it's laying kind of down the front of her-ish. And back on my color block layer with my magic wand tool, I can select that area and then Command Shift Inverse back on the layer that I pasted there. I can hit delete, and then we could keep going. But multiply is going to allow a lot of that layering to come through. So this is a pretty effective technique for applying these. So that's about the right size. Back on my pattern fill layer that I've rasterized, I can copy, and then I can paste it here onto its own layer. If I want to, I can paste it below my color block layer so I kind of have an idea of the size still. And then Edit, Transform, Warp. And I can kind of crunch this in so it looks like it's wrapping around the shape of the garment. Hit Enter. Oh, I kind of, yeah, there we go. Color block layer, Command Shift Inverse. And is it this guy? Delete. Accidentally hit Command S. So that is warping and texture mapping on a photograph and on an illustration. Do you guys have any questions on that side on Photoshop? Anything? Okay. We're just going to stop that.